Hello, everyone, and welcome to this campaign webinar titled Not Now is Your Most Expensive Decision. I'm Lucy Shelley, Tech Editor here at Campaign, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. So yes, we are here to talk about personalization, but more specifically, why it so often gets delayed and what that delay is really costing your business in terms of missed connections, reduced engagement, and lost revenue. Today's session is in partnership with Contentful and SAP Emarsys, and together we're going to explore how and why personalization is no longer a nice to have, but a critical part of how brands grow in 2025. We'll look at the barriers holding companies back, how AI and modern tech stacks are shifting the landscape, and crucially, what you can do now to get started or scale up. Of course, as it's a webinar, we will have questions, so please do send them in the comment box below, and we'll get to them at some point throughout the webinar, if not right at the end. So we've got plenty to cover, so let me introduce our speakers. Joining us from SAP Emarsys is Lucas Bergström, VP of ISV Partnerships for Germany. He'll be sharing new research into consumer expectations and personalization produced in partnership with Deloitte. Hello, Lucas.
Hey, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
And from Contentful, we have Andy Kaiser, VP of Product, who'll explain how a composable content platform and AI can unlock relevance and performance without burning out your team or tearing up your stack. Hello, Andy.
Hello everyone. Hello, Lucy. And thanks for having me here and for a great discussion we're going to have.
I'm looking forward to it today. We've got two fantastic speakers with us today. So, Lucas, let's start with you. As I mentioned earlier, you've recently partnered with Deloitte to publish a global consumer engagement report. Give us the top takeaways from that research. What should marketers really be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, I think there was kind of like three data point which stood out for me personally. Talking specifically about personalization, I think we had roughly more than 40% of all consumers that actively seek more personalization, right? And it's almost kind of like the expectation that they have for brands that they're interacting and engaging towards in this era right now. On the other side, you have the brands, specifically the marketers within the consumer product space that we interviewed for this report, that also really understood that they're not yet there where they need to be. Because also there we had more than 40%, again, almost half of the UK consumer product marketers, for example, that said their level of personalization is not where it needs to be, right? So there's still room to improve considering their campaigns and content and those to be effectively personalized. At the same time, I think this is kind of like the third pillar. More than 70% to almost 80% of all the marketers were pretty clear about that AI is very essential for not just engaging new customers, so for the customer acquisition across all these brands, but also 75% were sure that AI is a key component then of retaining customers. And so all of that is really aiming towards real-time personalization and creative efficiency to improve the level of personalization from brands towards those consumers. Because I think it's not just the brands. So I think for the last couple of years, we talked about the economic pressure that brands were under when we talk about budget and these kind of things. And I think now also consumers more and more feel that economic pressure. And so they're very picky when it comes to which brand they now want to buy from. Picky in terms of if I'm not getting that level of personalization back from the brands, I'm very easy to just go and switch to kind of like a non-label brand or just a different competitor if I'm not basically met with the expectation I came in as a consumer, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting to understand how it also impacts consumers and their shopper behavior. But did the data come up with anything surprising that shows how consumers respond to personalized experiences?
Yeah, and so I'd say like on the one hand, as I just said, kind of like the plus 40%, I'd say, look, we want more personalization in the form of more personalized deals, more personalized offers that really reflect kind of like my behavior towards or across some of the brand data touch points. We did also find out that roughly kind of like half of the consumers value products or content which is customized by AI, Where on the other hand, they also said they don't want to directly interact with AI, right? So we had this kind of like personalized, well, not personalized, but personal engagement and these like human to human interactions, which also stood out for consumers. But on the other hand, they're very much open to say, if I benefit from it, right? If the experience I gain from it, either from a content perspective, deal, offer, products, if that's tailored and optimized using AI, I'm very open towards it as a consumer. But at the same time, they were really critical about understanding if they share data with brands, how the data is being used, right? And so I think we had more than 70% who said they're very likely to just turn their backs to a brand if a brand's asking for data without really explaining why and for what it's being used. And so I think even above 80%, if I look at the stat sheet here, 84% really emphasized on the importance of clear data privacy policy, because I think we're now in an era where consumers, they understood what's happening in the tech world, right? And so they want clear, transparent communication from brands, and they really only want to share that data. So generally speaking, again, consumers are very much open and expect a level of personalization, but they really want to understand how the brands are utilizing the data if they're wanting to share it. And at the same time, brands really need to pay attention to that because that first and zero-party data is the critical component to really excel within that personalization game.
It's interesting. It always comes back to that, transactional piece, doesn't it? With consumers, like you said, with data, but with AI as well, and their kind of interaction with it. But, finally then, just to set the tone for the rest of the discussion, we were talking about not now, we're talking about this urgency piece. So how urgent is this shift towards personalization based on what you're seeing across markets?
I mean, as the title says, right, you've got to act now. And I think the majority of the different consumer product brand marketers that we've interviewed or interacted for this report have been very clear about this. Because again, more than 70%, almost close to 80%, believe that they need to really significantly transform their personalization strategy. And so I think as we heard, like almost 50% of already identified gaps, right? Because they say, look, we're not effectively personalizing our content, our campaigns, the engagement with consumers. And they understand that there's a really urge to do that now because some of those brands then already can kind of like report on some of the revenue loss or some of the negative experience for brands if they're not doing it already.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lucas. So let's move on and continue about, why personalization still stalls, I guess. Andy, I mean, if the need is so clear, why does personalization still get put off? What's stopping brands from moving faster?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because as Lucas has mentioned, consumers really are demanding personalization. And on the other hand, brands have identified the gap. However, when you look into the personalization strategies or programs, they often stall because it gets framed as a massive transformation project. With a big budget, long timelines, complex integration, and I have to share, it's not unusual to hear we need personalization from brands, but on the other hand, they're saying like, okay, but it's part two, it's second stage in our project. And the reality is that these kind of blockers are often more cultural than technical. It's about the people. Teams are afraid of disrupting what already is working, or they assume personalization means rebuilding everything. So again, big projects, a lot of technical integrations, etc. And the irony of all this is that delaying all these projects, delaying all this process, at the end creates more complexity later. And yeah, the more you wait, the more the problems grow. And if we look into content, it becomes harder to manage. The teams get slower. And I think one important part is that the consumers, they move on. So we are losing really a lot of opportunities. And when I say we, it's really without the voice of the brands.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to kind of differentiate, that it's a cultural challenge as well as, or maybe more than, a technical one, being able to, begin a project like this. But I wonder if you could elaborate a bit, in your conversations with clients, what are the most common blockers? Is it the tech itself, as we were talking about, or is it more to do with internal silos in culture?
Yeah, it's a mix of everything. Let's say it so. And I always say it is if we look into IT projects, there's a cultural, there's a people change management component. There's a technology, and at the end, it's why it becomes so important also to learn, to really set up small goals, learn with these goals, and then really go further. Instead of looking into this kind of like the old waterfall approach of saying, okay, we need to have everything perfect. There is no perfection. Perfection for me, it's really about learning with the interactions. And as I said, it's a cultural thing, or it's also a skill set. And I think if we look into the marketing tech stack or in the marketing stack, I remember 20 years ago, I'm a little older, so I remember when 20 years ago, nobody was testing, nobody was using analytics, and now it has become part of the marketing stack, and everyone is aware of the gaps, is aware of what are the benefits, what are the challenges with this technology. But at the end, the most important part is as personalization becomes part of or an essential part of the marketing stack, it will also become essential part of the strategies. And let's say you have mentioned it in the introduction. I think we are now in a disruption era with AI, which will make personalization much easier, and much easier.
100%, and it's going to be about that trade-off, as Lucas was talking about earlier. I mean, Lucas, from where you sit as well, what are the most common blockers, or why we're seeing this delay in your conversations with clients?
Yeah, I think definitely on kind of based on what Andy already said, those kind of like the cultural differences or cultural challenges that we sometimes face, everything together then also from how some of the departments as kind of part of those brands operate still in silos. So I think it's not even just a data silo, right? So we talked about data that might not even be used by marketers, but they've asked consumers for tons of data to share data, but then it's not used. So you have the data silos, but then you also have sometimes the team and department silos. A lot of the marketing teams that we've been speaking to, they're not sharing the data across some of the other departments, right? They're not sharing some of the data with like financial tools. They're not sharing this with kind of like services tools. And so there's a disconnect then as well. Because on the other hand, again, if we were talking about consumer expectation, for me as a consumer, it doesn't really matter where I am and like as part of the journey, or like where I'm interacting with a brand, whether it's a service ticket, I'm on a website, like I'm reading about product details. I want this whole journey to be personalized. And so this creates sometimes bigger challenges, because then if the data is not connected, for example, to the content component, that creates a challenge. If I'm not sharing the entire consumer data across my entire organization, this creates a challenge, which then sometimes also, if we're talking about budget, and you kind of, I think, hit on this part, is like they're thinking like siloed projects, but they need to think bigger, right? It can't just be kind of like marketing automation, and then there's a separate content piece, and then there's a separate service piece, and you need to kind of like try to personalize every single aspect in a silo. You need to understand the bigger picture, and you really need to be able to connect data, connect it to content, connect it to the different departments and touch points for the consumers. There it really makes sense. And I think this still takes a bit of time to really open up, and for some of these departments to collaborate much stronger internally to achieve those goals.
And here we are, this is a webinar trying to help businesses do better and, do things faster and create better experiences for customers. This is a question for both of you, but, we're talking about the dangers of delay, but where do these costs of delay tend to show up first? I mean, is it in the kind of tech limitations or the data gaps that you were slightly talking about, or more internal politics, sort of culturally as well? I mean, where do you see the cost of delay showing up first?
I mean, the immediate cost of delay is the declining revenue, right? So most of it is really impacting like retention, customer acquisition, and this has a direct impact to the bottom line of those brands. It's really that simple. But on the other hand, if we're hitting on this kind of like how departments need to collaborate a little bit better, there's also a hidden cost in there, right? Because you might spend money on multiple pieces of technology. I mean, we're looking at this in the reality for brands right now. It's a very fragmented tech landscape for those brands where they might have different budgeted versions for technology across those departments. Again, it's an extra cost that probably wouldn't like isn't necessary if they would consolidate some of the pieces and if they wouldn't just think in those silos and really make sure the data is connected, the systems are speaking to each other. Basically, exactly what we're also doing with our partnership between SAP and Contentful on this concept to show like the benefits of when you connect the different pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, do you see the costs of delay showing up in similar places, or do you see them showing up in different places and causing different effects as well?
Absolutely. We are also seeing it very, very similar. I see it very, very similar to what Lucas has said. It's not just one component. Of course, the revenue or the conversion or the engagement component is kind of like the big one. But the important part is that it's a lot of different factors that affect that part. It can be, as Lucas has said, internal cost. But there is one important factor I always see, and it's really velocity. And as we delay these kind of decisions, again, I'm speaking as a brand, the important part is that it's really about like taking everything longer. So if we look at it from making this decision of not now, later, it means that campaigns, as we said, will have less conversion, less engagement. But one of the biggest factors of success, for example, in experimentation personalization, is velocity, as I said. So as you test more, as you personalize more, you are going also to learn more. So what we see with our customers and what we always recommend is like, again, start small and learn. So for example, what are the meaningful data you need to make, for example, testing or personalization successful? And again, you can theorize a lot, but the important part is really proof that that theory is the right one. So having a fast velocity in this process is essential. And that's one of these hidden costs of nobody is looking into it. And I think at the end, as I said, that over time, if you are not personalizing, it creates a gap between, again, what consumer expect and what your marketing stack can deliver. And also, as Lucas said, right now we're in a very, very complex and competitive environment. It's not easy for brands. And let's be very clear, these kind of growth gaps, brands cannot afford them. So it's really about like looking into it right now, making decisions, and moving on.
Yeah, I think,
oh, sorry, Lucas.
I think velocity is a really great point, right? Because we have rapidly changing market shifts too. And I think the velocity, exactly how Andy described, is much needed for brands, because if you're still operating in the old ways and it takes you months, right, to implement some basic or foundational level of personalization, you're not going to keep up with the ever-changing market shifts. And I think they're happening faster than they happened like 10, 15 years ago. It's different platforms consumers interact with you as a brand. It's we had a couple of years of where retail almost shut down, and retail was king again. Again, consumers really appreciate human-to-human interaction, but you have different social shopping channels. All of that is just increasing the complexity for brands. And if they're missing out on this kind of like velocity, then they're really failing to quickly change and adapt to those market shifts at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you make two great points about why brands cannot afford to fall behind. But would you both say then that marketing teams are underestimating this hidden cost of not acting, that they're kind of not quite understanding the real impact of delaying as they are? Andy?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's marketing teams, generally brands underestimate this hidden cost. And as I said, again, it's like not really about conversions or engagement or revenue. It's really about like everything we have discussed, and especially velocity. And it's interesting because Lucas has said a couple of months. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a discussions with a brand, and they were even speaking about years. Okay, we need a couple of years to make the decision. And sometimes thinking about a couple of months could be, okay, there will be not a big change in a couple of months, but what will be the future in a couple of years? As I said, especially in a moment like this, with a lot of disruption from a technology perspective, with AI, etc. I would say even a couple of months is a lot, but the really the risk, and that's in my opinion what they are really underestimating is like there is a lot of hidden costs, and if you wait months, don't wait years, then all this hidden costs will pop up somewhere.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, in my role as a tech editor, I mean, it's can be days sometimes. You know, the speed at which things are changing is incredible. And like you said, I feel like there's a real sense of urgency within marketing teams and agencies and you know, SaaS platforms as well. It's just kind of, yeah, it's a challenge to keep up, but there's ways to do it, aren't there? So I think we should move on to talk about what good looks like and how we can get there. So let's shift to the solution side. I mean, Andy, whilst we're with you, could you talk us through how platforms like Contentful are helping marketers to personalize faster and at scale, as we've been talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So also, as Lucas has said, the actual landscape of MarTech is quite complex, and I think there is this MarTech landscape which was started to be developed like kind of like 10 years ago. There was like less than 100 tools. Now it's I think in 10,000 or something like that. So the landscape has evolved a lot. And if we look into also how platforms like Contentful or SAP Emarsys can really help marketers to personalize faster at scale, I think one important part, and in my opinion, this is one of the biggest shifts we're seeing in the last years, is really about modularity and context. And if we look into AI native and composable content platforms like Contentful, you can break your content and layout into reusable blocks. And this is super interesting if we look into for personalization. And these kind of reusable blocks could be, for example, a product description, a CTA, a banner, or even an offer, or even a price. And this is essentially if we look into personalization, because all these smaller parts are essential parts to be personalized. And on the other hand, context is yeah, a really important shift, and it's an important part of successful personalization, because first of all, we're speaking about people. We're speaking about people behind the screen, and they have a context, they have an intent, and identifying all these data points through data is essential really to make real-time personalization or instant personalization and really change small parts of the experience. Again, really to make it very easy for example, consumers to find a specific product or to interact with a specific product. And yeah, I think the modularity and context are essential because they really are changing how we see also not the interaction only in web, how we see the interaction in all the different channels.
And I guess this is where, as well, AI can make such a huge difference, especially, you know, in these kind of personalizing all the smaller bits as well. I mean, how do you see AI making the biggest difference? You know, where is it in terms of speed, scale, or cost?
Yeah, and this is interesting because if we look into like making smaller components, and I always say it like even personalizing one page is a big effort sometimes. I would say not about personalization, even having like the baseline or even having like this one version is a really big effort sometimes for brands. AI is really the game-changing part, in my opinion, in two areas. And you have mentioned it. It's like about speed and scale. And it's interesting because first, it removes the bottlenecks. So as I said, generating content variants, even identifying the right audiences, it takes time. And also even, for example, translating or localizing content takes time. And as I said, AI removes this bottleneck because it can generate variants, it can suggest audiences, experiments more or less instantly. And if we look into scale, personalization at scale is not possible without AI. Because first of all, you need big teams, you need expert, and AI make that much easier. So you don't need always like big teams to scale personalization. You don't need experts to scale personalization, and the difference is also like that you can start testing and personalizing hundreds of variants for different audience, and this can happen through AI automatically. So it's really about like speed and scale and how AI plugs into the workflow of the teams.
I mean, Lucas, from your side, how are you seeing brands use AI, in this way, in activation to drive better performance? Is it similar to Andy's, or are you seeing some other examples as well?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like optimizing some of the different components. So if we're just looking at it from an SAP kind of like Emarsys context, there are like 3, 4 different areas where AI comes into place, where we've started to embed this into our core product. It's on the one hand the audience and segmentation, right? So like how do you use the data that consumers shared with you to target the right consumers? It's about the measurement and insight. So I think it's hitting on this aspect that Annie described as like start to activate something and then you need to iterate because you need to test, right? And AI obviously can help to make these processes much more efficient, can highlight certain data aspects of your tests quite quickly to inform you on kind of like which areas to concentrate on. Because I mean, let's be honest, it's not easy being a marketer. You have such a breadth of data and touch points that you need to kind of like orchestrate. If you're using AI effectively for those types of operations, it's making you more efficient. The other areas is more towards kind of like channel optimization, where AI can be used to target kind of like the right consumers with the right channel. And then really when it comes to marketer productivity, I think that marketer productivity lives in both components. And so we help them with like either customized AI-based reports, but then also the same AI can be used across some of the content operations that Andy hit on. And when we look at a platform like Contentful, where we actually also started to use the synergies between those two platforms is specifically that content component, right? Because if you're creating content in a centralized and composable manner, you only create it once and you can reuse it across those different channels, whether it's the website, whether it's like native applications, whether it's like different digital marketing touch points and channels. And so that's where we actually partnered with Contentful because they've really optimized that part. And then for marketer, just say, how can I access all the AI optimized, some even AI kind of like generated content from within Contentful and replicate and reuse this across the different many marketing channels with Emarsys? I think really not just helps with the marketer productivity, but also we're talking about some of the hidden costs, and we talked about operational kind of like internal costs. Exactly those types of integration then help brands to lower those operational costs because they can be much more efficient in executing those personalized content bits across the various channels.
Great, thank you. And yeah, do keep sending the audience questions in. We've got one from the audience that I'm going to come to in just a second, actually. But before we do, Andy, I mean, we love a good example, a good story. So I wondered if you could give us a client example of a brand that moved from this not now, delay that we were talking about with all the barriers that we mentioned to the let's go and let's begin on personalization. What changed for this brand and what did success look like?
Yeah. I will give, we have a lot of examples, but and they're very similar. But one of our customers is a global retailer, and they really started small. And when I say started small, it's like they personalized a couple of landing pages offers using contentful personalization. So it was really about like, okay, what happens after the post ad click on the experience on these landing pages? And the interesting thing is like within weeks, they saw higher engagement, higher conversion, and most importantly, they were seeing a much faster test cycle, so much faster velocity than they had experienced before. And the interesting thing of all this story is that really these early wins gave them the confidence to scale. And in this case, it's they're using, for example, AI to generate product description, tailor the homepage content by region and audience, and also involving other teams in this. And as Lucas has said, in this case, it's interesting because it's related with what Lucas has said. It's like they reduced the operational cost and they increased the ROI through, for example, higher conversions and higher revenue. And in this case, one of the key shifts was moving from this project mindset of let's start, finish, really to this kind of platform mindset of, okay, let's start small, let's add some components and then expand into other parts. And again, like really in a very fast velocity with a lot of learnings, because what works for one brand could perhaps not work for another brand, and that's also why it's so interesting to have a really fast velocity and learn during the process.
I think you made a really interesting point about having the confidence to scale as well. It's not just having the kind of the tech ability, but showing these kind of early wins helps you argue the case to everyone in the business. But being able to know that you're on the right track and it's all going well. So the next part of this webinar, we're going to talk about getting started without the overwhelm. So having this confidence to scale, as Andy was just talking about. So Lucas, if I pose the next question to you, I mean, if a team has good data, as we have been talking about, but isn't yet activating it, what's the practical way to begin?
Yeah, I think good data is kind of like one aspect of it. It truly needs to be connected across the different departments. I think that's the first starting point. So still kind of like the data foundation is key in order to be in a position to excel and activate it in a positive manner across these kind of consumer engagements. At the same time, I would say start small, right? Don't make huge projects out of it. Pick a couple of use cases. Make sure once you have the data connected and you activate it, you can test effectively. And I think even that part we often see is not always a given across those brands, right? It's having the right data in the right place. It's having it connected to the right platforms in order to activate it. But then at the same time, being in a position where you can show measurable growth once you activate it. And I think a bit also trust. We talked about kind of like some of the cultural challenges. We've been implementing AI products for years now at SAP Emarsys. If I look back a couple of years, I think trust was a big issue, which goes kind of like hand in hand with some of the testing. So you need to open up, you need to trust some of these AI algorithms and AI optimized like content strategies. And you need to like give it a try. Concentrate on a couple use cases, iterate, test, and make sure you have the right tools to do so.
And it's obviously not just your own trust or client trust, it's also consumer trust. And I want to pick up an audience question here, which is going back to a point we were talking about earlier about this kind of transaction, this data transaction with audiences. And this is from Alina from the Department for Education. And she's asked, are you finding that your clients' target audience is asking about the data that companies and clients hold of them? Are you finding that as a barrier for anyone?
I think it's not.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, Lucas, go ahead.
You mean in terms of consumers actively asking for data that is being held by the brands?
Yeah, I guess are they telling you that they're seeing a slight mistrust or concern from this personalization point?
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously we had the kind of like the GDPR wave and kind of like all these implementations, the right to be forgotten that consumers now know about, right? They know about their rights and they know about how data needs to be handled. So there's that component that I think increased some of the cases on consumers demanding or requesting that from brands directly. But at the same time, I think it's a it's more kind of like the indirect impact that brands can actually identify when it comes to asking for the wrong type of data or not having a proper data strategy on how to effectively use the data. And I feel like I typically go back to something that most of us can relate to. Couple of years back, when you downloaded probably any type of native app on your phone and you started it for the first time, it just asks you for everything. Can we, like, can we share, can we access your contacts? Do you want to give us your location? Enable push notifications. And it actually took similar amount of time for brands to realize that this is a very negative experience. First of all, you're asking for data from a consumer that's starting to use your service for the first time, not knowing and understanding what you're using the data for. And so slowly but surely, we started to brands optimizing those kind of like onboarding workflows or onboarding processes for consumer and saying, hey, we let you explore our services first. And then bit by bit, piece by piece, we introduce kind of like more information about how we want to engage with you, right? So it can even be for like, hey, do you want to enable push notifications because we want to inform you about the following? Or why don't you share this piece of data with you because then we're in a better position to inform you about better suited deals, promotions, like we want to optimize how we engage with you. And I think this is something that brands have seen a lot because if they've implemented the old way, it's not performing very well.
Andy, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, I was going to just to double down on what Lucas has said. First of all, privacy legislation is there, and it's also beneficial for the consumers and even for the brands. And the interesting part is we haven't seen, for example, a spike in requests around data when, for example, our customers deploy personalization programs. And the interesting thing is, for example, is how you also respect the consumers about what kind of data you're asking. As Lucas has said, also about explaining why you're asking for some specific data. And this is another example of one of our customers, a global brand, very known, and their main strategy around personalization was really to collect better data. And that becomes interesting because they were asking for different data points for different audiences, because they were also testing what are the data, for example, some specific audiences want to share, what is the data audiences a specific audience does not want to share. And this also generates kind of like this respect or this interaction with different audiences. And most importantly, of course, data is like gold in our today marketing world. But the most important part is not having data just for the sake of having data. It has to be useful data. It has to be data which benefits the brand and benefits the consumer. And that's why gathering data should also be part of this kind of like strategy around the marketing stack. And is there a, how to say, like a best practice or like a golden path to success? Not really, but the most important part is really, again, about starting, about having like this velocity, understanding better your audiences, understanding better what is the data you have to collect, how this data is related, etc. And the interesting part again here is also like with data, with AI or with data, AI gets smarter, and that's where the biggest differentiator also is for brands.
Well, thank you for Alina for that question. But yeah, Andy, I was hoping there was going to be a simple golden path, but no, I guess it depends, isn't it? And we always have to use the data in different ways. But if we go back to talking about how clients can get started with confidence, as we were talking about earlier. I mean, with those that are working with legacy systems or quite lean teams, what are some manageable ways to get moving with AI or with modular content, as we were talking about earlier? And how do you decide where to test and learn first?
I can answer that, and it's interesting because also as Lucas has said before, it's really about being modular, and I think that's a key part. It's not only about like being modular or from a component perspective. It's really about like being composable as a business, which really means having this platform thinking about, okay, I don't need to change everything. I can also start small in this kind of state changes. And if we're looking, for example, legacy systems, like, for example, CMSs, we have customers who are really starting like this big projects and replace everything. And we have other customers who are like replacing kind of parts of their experience. It could be, for example, a campaign site or just a product page, which is combined alongside legacy tools. And I think one big question is like, if I want to be modular, where do I start? And I think one important part is that it really depends also from brand to brand. But what I usually recommend is like start where two things overlap, and this is high visibility and low complexity. Sometimes it could be the homepage, but sometimes it's the checkout. And really combining this high visibility and low complexity, you want to surface what your audience sees often. So again, it could be, for example, a homepage, it could be a landing page. And on the other hand, if you test AI for small parts, but painful tasks. So as we have said, for example, copy generation, it's sometimes a very hard thing. So using AI for that as a modular part, okay, let me copy through AI, do the copy generation. That's a good start. Or through A/B test variants or localization, etc. So as I think we have been saying, it's like really building a momentum with results and learnings.
Well, wonderful. We're close to coming to our audience questions, so please do send them in now, and then we can go through them in a couple of minutes. But finally, before we get to that, this is a question for both of you. We've talked a lot about creating this confidence within businesses, both culturally and technically as well. But how can marketers make the internal case that this isn't just a tech upgrade, it is in fact a growth strategy, as we've been talking about? Lucas, should we start with you first?
Yeah, I think it comes down to not just looking at marketing. I think it really depends on then also, I think we slightly hit on some of the budgeting challenges earlier on. It's then also how can you make sure that you advocate internally the impact some of the personalization or marketing activities can have on some other aspects of the company. And so I think typically we like to talk about service use cases, right? Where how can you take the same level of content, the same level of data, and you connect it to some of your services operations? Because again, then it's not just marketing budget you're asking for. It's like, hey, can we have this budget? I want to buy a new tool. I want to optimize it. But you're directly then also talking about, first of all, the operational cost that we hit on earlier, which is often forgotten when you start to request budget for these types of projects or enhancements. And at the same time, you can look at other departments and their kind of like cost efficiency as well, whether it's services, whether it's retail. For a long time, we had a challenge, I think, in a way, because it was a relatively smaller budget allocated for just digital kind of like marketing activities, personalization on site in some of these channels. But then specifically for retailers, consumer product brands, most of the revenue is happening offline. And there's definitely an impact, right? And so as soon as brands started to then also measure the impact across some of these, typically not looked at channels, whether it's retail, services, or some other components within the company, sometimes these initial costs, it made it very hard for them to justify some of the budgets. So I think that's a good starting point. again, if you're about this cultural change, don't just think in your marketing silo, right? You're trying to improve the efficiency for the entire brand. And so start to look across marketing and some of the other departments of how you can make your case that you can really be more efficient, whether it's like internal operational processes and so on, ultimately to impacting other departments as well.
Amazing, brilliant. Yeah, thank you. And then Andy, same question to you as well. How can marketers make the internal case for this?
And I would say the same answer. So the important part here is really that it's not about a tech upgrade. And we recommend that. I always recommend it is like reframe it as a revenue problem, as a business problem, and it's some tactical things is like bring example of the manual work you're doing today and what they're costing, how, for example, AI could reduce those costs, and on the other hand, show with clear examples how faster AI native personalization impacts conversion, engagement, and speed to market. So the ROI part, and I usually recommend to you the CFO test. So frame everything, use a language that any CFO understands. So it's about agility, efficiency, and growth. And as I said, and as Lucas has said, is like really make clear cost reduction, ROI increase. And at the end is starting now also makes a case to make it bigger and to break the silos because it's personalization data is not about marketing anymore. It's about like really the whole brand, and it involves a lot of different departments, a lot of different teams, and that's why it's so important really that we frame it as a revenue problem and not a technical upgrade, and that we frame it from a CFO perspective.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, we've got about 10 minutes or so left, so let's bring in some audience questions. So if you haven't already, just drop them into the comment box below and I will be able to see them and we can continue talking. So a first question we have is about staying brand consistent. So we know personalization is important, but how do you balance it with the need to stay brand consistent across different markets and teams? Andy, let's start with you for this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really, really good question. And this is also when we think about like the combination AI and modular content really shines. Because if we look into brand consistency has a lot of different levels. So it could be, for example, also visual consistency through design systems. It's tone of voice, but also depending of the different countries or localizations, etc. So it's really important that we give, as I said, like the AI context. And the context can come through, for example, these content components. But as I said, also like the tone, templates, visual. And it's important to have systems centrally being able to work with all this brand elements or building blocks, and then making it compatible with the experiences in the different channels. And that's where tools like Contentful or platforms like Contentful shine, but also like the ability really to have through composability connection with other tools, like for example Contentful with SAP Emarsys. It's possible to have brand aligned content, which is then distributed through SAP Emarsys, etc. And I think it's like at the end, it's like how we combine the different parts of the architecture or of the platform.
New one of us would forget to unmute ourselves. It's so easily done, but I'm sorry, I can speak now. Yeah, thank you, Andy. Another question that we have coming through, let's go to you, Lucas, for this, which I think is quite an interesting one actually, which is what's your view on how personalization affects long-term customer loyalty versus short-term conversion? Because I think we've spoken a lot about the short-term conversion, but then also how does it over time add to that loyalty that we're all looking for? Lucas.
Yeah, I think as you said, it's a really interesting question because there's different kind of nuances of it. But ultimately there's different way of how we could reach kind of like short-term conversion, but then we're very likely to end up in a cost discussion again, because you can like use discounts and these types of promotions to relatively, like if you identified buyer intent to get to that short-term conversion, or you can like look if you just kind of look at your product and kind of like merchandising strategy in terms of discounting, even without individual promotions, you can sometimes get to that short-term conversion. But then if you're utilizing the personalization aspect of really making sure you create a conversation between those consumers and the different touch points that your brand operates, it's much cheaper. It can be much cheaper, right? Because then you're not just utilizing incentives, kind of like discounts and the type of strategies or tactics that sometimes eat up some of the margins. But if you're really implementing that efficient personalization across the different channels, your consumers will be much more likely to actually build that kind of like brand advocacy with your brand. They enjoy every single interaction, which not necessarily always has to be about a purchase intent, right? It's about finding the right information on site, having the right content to also optimize the on-site experience or the different channel experience, which then I think is a much stronger and more cost-efficient strategy if you implement it and then think about the long-term result of it, rather than just thinking about this short-time conversion and using discounts and these types of product promotions, which can really eat up your margin on those conversions as well.
What about you, Andy? Would you how would you answer about how it affects both long-term and short-term solutions?
Yeah, I'm also seeing very similar things like Lucas has mentioned, and here, if we look into personalization, for example, it's good personalization always generates also trust in the consumers, and if you generate trust in the consumers, understanding their context, and I think it's important without being creepy, and that creates like really this brand affinity, long-term value, and at the end, all these components or all these parts really drive conversion, but it also reduces churn, increase lifetime value, and I think sometimes as marketeers we forget, or as product people we forget also that everything is about people. So if we make people feel special, feel seen, that's really the long game, and it's personalization. It's always about customer experience and how we improve the customer experience. And I usually say, if you generate a great customer experience, the impact on revenue will come after. So sometimes it's more important really to focus on this customer experience, and the revenue will come, and the revenue will come like in a long-term perspective.
Great, thank you, Andy. So we have a question from Alice from Molten Brown. And Lucas, let's go to you for this one. She is asking, is a CDP, a customer data platform, essential to execute cross-channel personalization? She says that Molten Brown are currently using Emarsys like a CDP, but do you think this is going to bring challenges using it like that, or what would you recommend?
No, I think the central piece is if you're in a place where you can like consolidate the different data touch points that are relevant to execute your personalization strategy, then you're in a good position. I mean, obviously within some of the brand kind of like examples or larger enterprise strategies as well, it's then sometimes where a CDP would come in if it's not just about the personalization strategy, right? Where like different data modeling and different data sharing concepts need to be introduced in order to look holistically at the entire customer experience across sales, service, wholesale, and some of the other channels that are then part of the architecture of those brands utilizing it. But with many brands like that, like Molten Brown, who use SAP Emarsys as that central piece specifically for the marketing data, and being in a position to consolidate it, to understand their consumers, and then also to activate this across the different channels.
Wonderful, thank you. So we are nearly at time, but just before we wrap up, I wanted to ask one final question of the both of you. So Andy, let's start with you. What's the one thing a marketing leader should do this month if they have been stuck in the not now mode, as we have been talking about? Andy, let's go.
Yeah, I think as we have been saying through the webinar, it's really about starting now. Think about like where's the potential of the personalization strategy, but don't think it about like a strategy for multiple years. Really think about it. Okay, where is the highest potential? Where can we start now to learn more? And then really building a business case or building a case for the company. So it's about really starting now, and then with the learnings expanding into the business, and yeah, at the end making the experience of the customers or the consumers better at the end.
Wonderful, thank you. And Lucas, same question for you. What's the one thing a marketing leader should do this month if they've been stuck in the not now mode?
I'd probably say lean towards kind of like don't overthink it. I think again, nuanced, right? So if you have good data, if you have the right systems where everything is connected, if you're at this point, don't overthink it. Like pick one of your existing use cases, perhaps, right? And think about strategies on, am I really leveraging all the data for this use case? How can I optimize it? And then lean towards some of those foundational AI capabilities most of the tools like SAP Emarsys, like Contentful have, to help you guide towards kind of like the personalization, optimization, and the efficiency. So again, don't overthink it. Start small, experiment, let AI help you, and then I think you're in a good place.
Yeah. Lucy, let me just give an idea about this, because I think it's always like, okay, do we have the right data? Do we have even the right tooling to start personalization? And I would say sometimes a great place to start is just localization. It's an easy form of personalization, so it's also a way of demonstrating the impact at scale. So looking into like how I adapt, for example, the messaging to a specific audience, which at the end is a specific country or a specific city. And based on those learnings, you have kind of like this proto elements for personalization, which then can really help you to build this business case, etc.
Well, there we have it. Everyone here now really has no excuse to be delaying any further. It's the let's go mentality that we're in now, not the not now. So thanks again to our speakers, Andy Kaiser and Lucas Bergstrom, and to Contentful and SAP Emarsys for partnering with us today. And of course, thank you to our wonderful audience who have joined us here today at Campaign and for sending in some fantastic questions. The on-demand recording of this session will be available very shortly, so please do feel free to share the link with others who may be interested. But for now, goodbye from us all.